I want to move on to some other issues, and that is to make the observation that the market perceives, and in fact the consequences are starkly different between, on the one hand, the U.S. government failing to make an interest payment on a bond, or on the other hand, furloughing some government workers, or delaying a reimbursement to a vendor, or failing to cut the grass at the monument. These are very, very different events. The month of August has scheduled about $30 billion of interest payments. The Treasury is sitting on a $94 billion portfolio of mortgage-backed securities, and we expect a minimum of $125 billion in tax revenue. Now, I don't know of anybody that suggests that we can or should go indefinitely without raising the debt ceiling. And I have argued that we certainly would be much better off reaching an agreement and raising the debt ceiling prior to August 2nd. But there's a big, big difference between a payment default on our debt and the other kinds of payment disruptions. I think this administration would be wise to send an unambiguous message to the market that under no circumstances would they tolerate a default on our debt, which is entirely under their control to prevent. But I acknowledge that that is the realm of the Treasury, and that is not your responsibility. What I would like to address is what is under your realm. And I have said, Mr. Chairman, I fully acknowledge that the things that you've done under very difficult circumstances have only had the best motivation, but I am concerned about the expansion and power of the central bank that we have. The unusual steps that we've taken, the enormous discretion that the Fed now has and exercises. My concern is that this distorts markets, intentionally actually. It also introduces enormous uncertainty as to how the Fed will behave. The Fed becomes the biggest player in driving the bond market, the equity markets, and that this is a dangerous place that we've come to. And I hope that we revert as soon as possible to the more normal role that the Fed has played. One of the unintended, I suspect, if not unforeseen consequences of this unusual policy, it seems to me, if we take the very, very low interest rates, the roughly 0% Fed funds rate, the negative real interest rates the Fed has maintained for an extended period now, it seems to me that this contributes to enabling Congress to run excessive deficits. Our debt's cheap to finance, especially when compounded by the fact that the Treasury has chosen to shorten up the maturity, I think unwisely. The net effect is we're not yet paying the price, the real market price, that we certainly will eventually have to pay for these massive deficits and this huge debt. I don't think for a minute that that's your intention to facilitate this fiscal irresponsibility, but I think it is the unintended consequence of these extremely low interest rates as just one example. But to your testimony, you've raised the possibility now that if economic circumstances warrant it, you would consider, you've opened the door to an additional round of securities purchases. What will no doubt be dubbed QE3. And I guess my concern is that what's wrong with this economy is not fundamentally monetary policy, it's other things. And so I would just ask you to comment on what you see that is wrong with our economy that QE3 would fix. What is the theory that another round of security purchases will somehow generate the economic growth that we lack?
Well, first to go back to the facilitation issue, our goal is to try to meet our mandate of maximum employment and price stability, which is why we run monetary policy as we do. I don't think that our policy would prevent a loss of confidence if creditors lost confidence in the Treasury, which would drive up interest rates. It hasn't happened yet, but I don't think it's because of us. I think it's because people still think that they have confidence in our government's ability to make its payments. These asset purchases, I recognize they're unconventional, but they work more or less in terms of how their effects on the economy, they work more or less in the same way that ordinary monetary policy works, by easing financial conditions, lowering interest rates, and providing stimulus through that mechanism. Now, you may be entirely correct, A, that it might not be needed, and B, that it might not be particularly effective given the configuration of problems that we have. For example, if credit is not being extended, and for example, or if the problems really arise from other sectors that are not responsive to interest rates. So those are certainly things we'll take into account, Senator. We're not proposing anything today, the main message I want to leave is that this is a serious situation. It involves a significant loss of human and economic potential. The Federal Reserve has a mandate, and we want to meet that mandate. And to do that, we just want to make sure that we have the options when they become necessary. But at this point, we're not proposing to undertake that option.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Akaka.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Bernanke.
Good morning, Senator.